PR Connections Radio presents.
Did you know your clothing could help balance your body's pH levels? Our cutting-edge fabric technology naturally promotes optimal pH balance, helping you feel energized, refreshed, and at your best every day. Use promo code PRTalk for more info. Tap the link in the description or contact our experts at 702-445-9488 to learn more.
Hi, welcome everybody. Hello in September. I hope everybody's having a new season and happier start to this new season. Women in the workplace, welcome to Liberating Menopause. Thank you, PR Connections Podcast Radio, for hosting me. And today our podcast is where we're going to be stirring truth into silence and flavor into the forgotten chapters of a womanhood. You know, because menopause isn't just really what we're feeling inside chemistry-wise, but honestly, the ability of our thoughts and what moves us. And throughout all these new discoveries that I've been discussing with you is all about, sorry, my thing is crooked, is all about all these, like, as I talk about all the ailments and all these different pains that occur in our workplace and things that we never correlated and brought them together into our lives as far as they are changes in our cycle, in our life, in the styles of ingredients of what we put into this life as we move forward, coming into the working world at a young age, you know, and you know, looking 5 years ahead, but not knowing what's creating and what's that going to look like. You know, you could plan and dream about that point of life and put everything into the pot that you want for these ingredients to create into your life. And then, of course, things change and there's different upsets that occur and a lot of different roads that shift and change also because of the preparations that may have to take place, the planning that, did you plan enough time? I mean, because they say what we do today will surface in 5 years, and it all comes from today being what we work for tomorrow. So on this podcast today, we are mixing the raw ingredients of real life career, transition, motherhood for sure, because you know how in our identities, we are going to be taking a lot of different identities as women. And, you know, the leadership when we turned and started to go to work and those changes that have created a new women and all women who are chasing the dreams to walk into those new roles and shift their identities and fight through changes and challenges in life that are going to lead them there, whether that's up against other co-workers who are going for the same lead position or, you know, that it's just a big shift that's going to be taking place. And as we mix all these things up, we don't look at our life as a big bowl of ingredients and things that we put in. But honestly, you know, when you can kind of measure things out a little bit, if you stop and start to measure what's been put in, I mean, you know, there's like 4 chambers to our heart. And are we filling that up? Is there like 3 chambers filled with negativity or all 4 of them filled with positive changes, positive voices that surround us, things that are going to lift us up? And in our life in women's world, we usually are the ones that lift people up and create those changes. So as we dissolve in that, because we are creating different things for other people besides ourselves. This is what our conversation is going to be about today as I sit down and talk with her. Name is Rhodes Gabriel. She's the founder of Pinched Sugared Pastries. And Rhodes, she has gone through a lot of changes in the working world. So we're going to be talking to her and going down a nostalgic road as we evolve into the 5 decades of her life that have changed and transformed. And she's going to give us a little bit more insight of some of the scenes that take place on the journey that she traveled through to come to the point of where she's at today. So I'd really like to welcome Rhodes onto the page today. Hi, Rhodes. How are you?
Hi, everyone. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Thanks for joining me today. And, I'm looking forward to this conversation. Rhodes has been in my life for a while. And, the coolest part of her being in my life was in my growing years when I was coming into my 20s. Rhodes is a hairdresser. And so at age of 18, she created a big industry of beauty for the women in the neighborhood. And this was a cool neighborhood because, when we walking around, just as any designer, we all walk around and they all knew that there was a touch of Rhodes in our hair because, boy, the transformations that she sent me through, she gave me so many different identities. I mean, one side was all gone, the whole side was there, from curls to straightening jet set packs on my hair, colors, what do you call that? Cellophane, those cellophane colors.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So my hair has gone through a lot, but anyway, and I thank that to Rhodes and all her creations of creating all these identities, especially during this 5-year hiatus I had taken in my life to search myself out. So I got to live through different identities and different things that I never thought I would step into, but because of her creativity at that time, was just really surprising. And so tell us about that first journey, Rhodes, when you first became that hairdresser and, those struggles because you were young when you opened that shop. So how did that go?
Lisa, first I want to thank you for having me. I never thought that a conversation between us would turn into this, which is let's talk. But you're right, in the day, when we were all teenagers, I decided to buy a beauty shop. Well, let me start by saying I was fascinated by hair. And I used to hang out at a local beauty shop, and a couple of friends worked there. And I was fortunate to learn how to cut hair, but I hadn't gone to school. So in order to move forward, they said, well, you have to go to school. And I did. And thankfully, I, got licensed and went to high school and beauty school at the same time. And I had the opportunity to work part-time at the shop that was near your home, down the alley at the corner. And when that opportunity came up, I decided to kind of break the bank without telling my family that I was interested in doing it. I felt it was a good opportunity, and I already had customers, so I was like, oh, this is going to be great. And my parents, as any other responsible parents, lost their minds. Like, what were you thinking? I'm really not sure what I was thinking, other than I was excited that I had that opportunity and I had the customers. And I kind of figured, well, sink or swim, sink or swim. Fortunately, I was able to swim, thankfully, because of you and the girls and word of mouth and everything, everything that went with that. So that's kind of what began my journey to doing hair, and having my shop.
And having her shop at such a young age. And I shared only that side of her life. I was just her customer. So I'd come in and out of the shop. And, so there was so many different parts of her chapter of life that I didn't know. But like any other, her journeys into, now we're going to go into the levels of transition, because now when you the shop was coming to an end because
the new owners of the building they were going to tear down the building and put a currency exchange in. And where that building was going to sit was right where my shop was. So the journey kind of ended because of that and my want for having kids and a family. And prior to getting my shop, I was working at other shops, and my fellow coworkers were raising their kids in the back of the shop. And we all became like babysitters, like, oh, did so-and-so's baby eat? And we'd all, if we were having lunch, we made sure the kids had lunch. And I thought to myself, I'm not doing that. I didn't want that for my kids. Do you know how many times we had to hand a kid a sandwich and we might have had hair in our hands because we were no one thinks of, no one thinks of that because you're so busy. I mean, even the food we were eating, I'm sure, because we had moments to just eat. You know how busy it was. You guys got all ready, but I was still at the shop working.
Right. Yes. And, young mothers and, fast schedules and busy things like that. And so now that you've just created yourself into another identity, because here you go, now what you step into, what became.
Well, then I was like, what am I going to do? I want a family. I have no insurance because they don't say that when you're, going to school and choosing a career. And I needed to have a job with insurance and more stability. And that I was able to take care of my kids and not work 12 to 16 hours a day, because I worked many hours at the shop, especially when you wanted to thrive your whole life, your energy, everything about you becomes that shop. Well, now I wanted to share some of that with a baby, and I didn't, and I realized I don't have much to share in this position. I have to find another, correct. So I partnered with another friend who was opening a shop, and we co-founded, and he founded it and I stepped in, and we worked together for a while until I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And the opportunity of staffing came up through a neighbor, and I knew nothing. I barely knew computers because coming out of high school, I bought my beauty shop. So I didn't have an experience working at, like as a cashier or anything like that. All I did was hair. That was what I did. So I lied and I said that I knew computers, and I took the book home and I was going through every page trying to see if there was anything that I could pick up. I knew how to type and I knew how to market, and we were marketing nurses. So I thought, we could do this. I do, in a little bit of a side note, I want to share with you that prior to that, for a short period of time, I worked for a chiropractor, and that chiropractor, I didn't know, again, computer or their system. And I said, oh, I know the system and whatever. He gave me the opportunity. I became a manager there, and I was doing healthcare presentations. So I thought to myself, if I could do that, how could I not sell nurses and, get into staffing? And it was a more secure job, and, it wasn't commission based, and, like I was going to get paid 9 to 5 and get a 401k and, all the things that you want. So I jumped in as a receptionist part-time. And then I worked up the ladder as my kids got older, and I had more opportunities until I became a regional manager. And I will say, when I gave you the original numbers, I do have 10 years. When I gave you the numbers as the amount of years in staffing, but I did have over 10 years. And that's, like I said, what took me there was the lack of insurance, the lack of stability, and the want to have a family.
And so now you're creating a new identity as you're going behind the scenes of the reality of juggling the staffing and the crisis and the payroll pressures. So now it's like having a whole nother set. And was something that was relating in your life as you were getting into that? Or were these what I call invisible leaderships? I mean, you had to create as you went on to,
Exactly. As my kids grew, you're right. As my kids grew, I took on responsibilities as as I saw fit for that particular moment. Remember, we kind of had a discussion how you become a chameleon and you start changing with the moments that come in front of you. You don't necessarily know you're going that way, but you have a gut feeling, and you start venturing out. And in my case, I knew I didn't want to be a receptionist. I was a manager of my own business. Why in God's name would I be working part-time as a receptionist, filling out applications? But you know what? That was God's guide. That I feel that was God's way of giving me a little bit of a stepping stone into my next step, which was then I became a coordinator, and then, staffing coordinator, then a manager, then I became a marketing manager, and then a regional manager, all that from a part-time receptionist position,
And the stress levels that occurred with this position, because healthcare and nursing and, the women that you dealt with to get them into their positions and jobs, how did that go? How were the nurses? How was, what makes a nurse go to an agency instead of just going to apply to a hospital to get a job?
Okay. I will say, as many fun years as I had in staffing, because I have wonderful staff and we to date are still friends. But it's a stressful position because the hospital needs the nurse now. When they call you, there's an urgency. And if you can't fill it within your pool of staff, you at some point you even offer extra money, whatever. I'll pick you up, I'll take you because you work 4 hours, and I promise. There's a lot of promises because you're very stressed to fill that need. Now remember, this the hospital has an urgency, and you have an urgency to fill it because it's your job to fill it. So as for the nurses, you have the wonderful nurses who work too many jobs, a lot of jobs and a lot of hours, and that's their life. But then you have the other nurses who take a position and then decide, oh, guess what? I don't want to work today. Well, in just a matter of a second, you go from, oh, great, I have it covered, to, oh, my God, we have 10 minutes to get it filled and we have nobody. So you can imagine the stress that goes with that, because we've already confirmed it with the customer and, the hospital, and we've already said, we have you covered. And then and then that happens. So
and do they just move on to another agency then at that point?
Well, correct. This is the challenge of agency. There's a lot of agencies, a lot. There's many, small, big. Each agency has, in a way, kind of their specialty, but they all do the same. So because there's a competition, there's always someone, bidding less than what you bid to service that customer. So you then have the challenge of what could we do differently than the other agencies so that we could keep that client, so that we could keep our nurses working. Now, remember, we have two stressors. Our upper executives expecting X amount of performance, our nurses looking for work, and our hospitals needing staff. All those things have to match in order to fill one shift. Not always easy. It's not.
And what is this transforming you into? Not only a chameleon. You talked about being an octopus. Because
you become an octopus.
You're focusing on one person, but you have to focus on how many staffing a nurse in one day. Say, for instance, that you're juggling
hundreds. Oh yeah, because you're also juggling urgency. For example, if two hospitals need the help, and let's say it's a specialty nurse, you have to decide which hospital is going to get that nurse or which nursing home. And they both are needed. You also staff a nurse, and, in defense of nurses, sometimes they go into these hospitals with little information. It's the first time their agency. And then they're slammed with an abundance of patients that they need to take care of. And many times they will call and say, I'm not doing it. And in that moment, I then have to be a psychologist or whatever I need to be to say, please, can you just stay this shift? And I will no longer send you there again. But I really need you to, finish this shift. And then you have to pray. Pray that the nurse is compassionate enough to say, you know what, I'll just do it this time. That doesn't always happen. Many times the nurse will leave, even if her license is at risk, because that's considered patient abandonment. So lots of stressors. Octopus, because you also have to be available for complaints if something happens. Then you become the clinical, manager to take the report and then sometimes go to the facility, find out what happened, sometimes remove the nurse. In that removal, still be on the phone. Could we find someone else as soon as she's done? I get her out. Do we have a replacement?
Wow.
So that's where the stressors come in.
And that's in a matter of a matter of the first couple of hours in a day?
Oh, that could happen. That could happen within a half an hour before a shift or during the day. It could happen in the middle of the night because we're 24 hours. So I have been known to take, I always would tell employees, I've been in every single position in this office. There's no position I haven't been in. So if there was really complaints, I knew the position to speak about it. So no one really complained much to me about that stuff because they knew that I was in the trenches, and I had no problem being in the trenches because it was our job to fill, the need for the client, but very high stress. Very high stress.
Very high stress. So right now I'm already seeing Rhodes getting lost in this. I want to hear that one story about, I think you had to go chase payroll and you had to go sit out in the parking lot because you had to wait.
Yes.
And so now outside of, you just left kind of that morning complicated moments with all that, but somebody's got to get paid. And
correct.
Now who are you?
Well, then I become the payroll person. And we only had until midnight to process in the computer the payroll. However, the package needed to be at FedEx before then because they would close. And we were like lunatics trying to, get everything ready, get everything processed, get it in the package that I would call FedEx. And I'm sure that at some point they probably hated us and say, please, I will meet the truck wherever. If I have to park it, I'll park in a parking lot. I'll wait wherever. Where's the next stop? Just to get the package there on time. Because if that package did not get there, the nurses would not get paid on time. Wow, because at that time, that package was everyone's payroll. It was everyone's billing. So we had a deadline, and there was many times that by the skin of our teeth did we get it in, but we always got it in.
Wow. Yeah, see, so because I'm always talking about, what a woman's life is during the daytime in a job with all the different shifts that the job, we didn't talk about the shifts that before you left to go to work, what was taking place, because apparently you're a mom, so you had to have the babysitter or whoever, daycare, school.
Well, yeah, well, in my case, and as many women who work, you hope to have a partner that's available at the time that you need them to be available so that they can make your life easier. That wasn't the case for me. In my case, I had a husband who was in a situation where he couldn't work. He couldn't drive. So I would bundle my kids at 1 a.m. and I would put him in the car and make sure he got to work. And then I would come home. I would put the kids back in bed, and then I would wait, for whoever was, taking care of them. And then I would go to work. At my lunchtime, I would pick up my husband. I would drive him home. And then I would go to I had 3 offices I was over. I would go to the closest office and I would finish my day there. And many times it would roll into nights because travel time, there was a lot of missed time, traveling. So I would then find myself making it up, at night. And this is when I tell you that some days are softer than others. And those days were harder days. Those were difficult days. And I look back and I wonder, how did I do it? Would I be able to do that now? I don't know if the need presented itself. Maybe I could, but at that time, that's the way it was. And guess what? No one knew that I was driving that I was on little sleep, driving him, making sure he was set, making sure my kids were set, and also getting their lunches, meals, all that other like you said, behind the scenes stuff. And, but that's again, the chameleon. Because who did I become? I was the chauffeur. I was the lunch lady because I had to get their lunches together. And I had to be the psychologist to myself and tell myself, you could do it, you could do it, you could do it. This is fine. You're tired, but I'll make it, So you become a lot of different things. And a lot of women don't talk about all those little things we do, behind the scenes, but you're kind of embarrassed to tell people. Like I was kind of embarrassed to tell people, well, my husband can't drive and the reasonings behind, you know what I mean? Like no one really wants to.
They wear these invisible capes, just like what you're saying, that caregiver.
Well, you keep them because yeah. Well, it's unnormal. It's not, you don't consider that normal. So you choose to just not talk about it. Internalize it.
You don't consider it normal? I mean, or society doesn't consider it normal.
I think that people have made it normal because life has become that way. And some circumstances you have to make it like, okay, guess what? I had to make it normal in my life that I was going to drive him every morning at 2, 1, he had to be there at 2, at 1 in the morning. I had to talk myself into committing, and being able to do that even before I did. So I just didn't complain about it at that point because that was what we needed to do for that moment. But
now you exchanged that cape and stepped out.
And then I had to step out because unfortunately the care didn't turn out as well as I would have liked it to be for the boys. And I was very open to see that my youngest was not really thrilled about, the sitters of choice. And I then had to make the conscious decision, what can I do from here differently? But then the work decided to make the choice for me. They laid all the regional managers off. And then I thought, you know what, maybe this is a sign that I need to find another route. Because at this point, I really didn't have the support I needed for the kids as they were getting older, so I then became a financial, administrator for a financial advisor, which gave me flexibility to be off when I needed to be off. And I wasn't stressed with the 24-hour responsibility that I have with staffing, because as a manager, you have 24-hour responsibility. They don't pay you hourly, they pay you salaries. So, you need to be available 24 hours. As an administrator, I was able to be available 9 to 5 and go home and do things with my kids, assemblies and all those things. So my life switched how many times since my youth? Many, which makes me a chameleon and many other mothers.
And so then when you stepped out and became your own boss, when you started, at this point right now, you were already going through a lot of changes. You fluctuated
Yes,
a lot, and again, we never know that we stirring hormonal shifts into all these things,
correct.
but all these different feelings and flares that you went through led you to an ingredient that, because as a self-starter that you started out to be, you walked into. Where did you take that step where you said, okay, this has to all stop, where you wanted to go and, develop your own after being
COVID happened.
uh,
COVID happened, and I was working as an administrator, and I was, I lost my job during COVID because they closed, and I was doing a lot of baking. I was doing baking, and people were saying, wow, you need to consider selling these. And I, of course, thought, haha, because I was giving them away and taking them to parties for people, as a gift. And then finally, one of my customers said to me, I really need you to make a dozen kolaches. I want to buy a dozen. And he says, and I want you to, are you available at 10 o'clock on Thursday? And that particular day, and I can't remember, it was on my birthday. And I said, well, I am available. He says, because I have a meeting at a local coffee shop. And I thought he was joking with me. And he said, I'm really serious. If I had investment money, I would invest in your cookies. And I thought, this is crazy. This is just a recipe I pulled out and I baked for, just my friends. And we met by 10:30, and by 6 o'clock, my cookies were already accepted to be in the coffee shop. And then I thought to myself, this is a business. I had no choice. I didn't even have a name. I didn't even have packaging. I had nothing. I didn't even have a label. And I walked in with a cookie with no label, no name, no nothing other than, what was there. And I had like overnight, slowly develop the business, which became Pinched and Sugared, which you now know is really, it's been successful, and I'm very happy that it's successful, and I hope that I could continue that route. And I'm doing something that makes me happy, which is kind of fun,
So did that ground you more? I mean, are you more in connection with yourself after when you've seen all the stress that you lived through? And, ever since I retired, I know that, I'm living a collective life of time because it just overlaps. And really, in a retirement world, it's crazy. I was just talking with somebody, and he mentioned that there was an article that he was reading about how time overlaps. I was saying that, you really do. You're released from the chains of the clock. I mean, that collective time doesn't, it's now a collection of your life and what you're doing. And, you get to put the time on whatever it is you want to do now. And that's my life in this retirement thing. But in your life, taking these steps into this new business of yours and juggling roles, mom, wife. I mean, you'll always be a mom, all these new things that have taken you and led you quietly but powerfully. How do you honor that?
Why? That's a good way of putting it.
Huh?
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. So how do you honor that strength in you?
Well, I will say to you that I didn't realize baking could even become stressful. Although I'm doing something I love, it still has moments of stress because you strive for perfection. So when it's almost like doing hair when I was doing hair. What you see me do, I see differently. I always see room for perfecting. And with baking, I'm kind of the same way. So I want that perfect cookie. And that's why I told you one day I have my oops container. And that oops container is sometimes full. And then in the morning, I have to reevaluate all the cookies because I was hard on myself the night before that more harder than I should have been. So I want to say that the strength that has gotten me through those moments is the love that I have for baking. And it's the love that I have for the customers who purchase it and send me such beautiful feedback that make all those hours of baking and all those oops cookies away. It makes it all worth it at the end, to see the happy faces and hear the happy thoughts after the party, or you made the party, or I can't believe yours was the only one complimented, and so many, all those things make me stronger to continue working harder to make the business thrive.
Yes. Wow. When the ingredients are all there and you have a whole cupcake or kolachki in your case, that has to be amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, they are amazing. I have eaten them before, and yes, they are very, very good. So that, it's really interesting to see these different flashes of your life that have changed you and transformed you. And, that wasn't even really talking about when you had to come home and raise the children. And that was 3 different little identities, because you have 3 male
Yes.
boys, right?
Yes.
And so being a woman in that world and having to be mom, I mean, husband was there, but developing those boys throughout this lifestyle that you were
Yes.
living, like a whole lot of other mothers are doing, and trying to keep it all together. And, then you even had a moment recently where you had to become a caregiver because your mother fell.
Yeah.
And usually
Yeah.
around this time of our lives, those accidents started happening so unexpectedly. Then you became that caregiver for 6 months. And that had a moment of challenge with your home business because of that, correct?
Absolutely. And that's when I say, sometimes you hope things go smoothly, but something happens. You're only moments away from something happening that could change your entire life. And that's what happened with me. My mom fell, and I had to become her 24-hour caregiver. I was always her caregiver. She's 95, but thankfully she was an independent, and still is an independent 95-year-old. However, when she broke her knee, I had to reduce the amount of orders I could take. At some point, I couldn't take any orders because of her therapy and, all the things that, again, they don't tell you about as you're getting older unless you have another family member that has gone through that. And I don't. So in my case, I bought her home. Would I have done things? Did I learn things now that I would have done differently? Yes. I would have probably put her in a rehab and taken care of her there, gone there every day versus at home, because then my business and, everything had to stop for me, which is a financial hit, an emotional hit, a psychological hit. I mean, there's a lot of, yeah, a lot of hits, a lot of guilt too, because am I doing enough? Am I not doing enough? Am I doing it right? Am I not doing it right? There's so many things you question. And depending on if they have dementia, or if they have the beginnings of dementia, that is a whole different world that begins. That's a whole different kind of caregiving. That's complete mentally, and physically exhausting.
So some of the ways that I identified with you was that you didn't lose yourself. You just changed the recipe. Everything I talk about with you has all ingredients. From the day I met her, she was mixing something for my hair or somebody else's. You've always been in that mixing bowl. So I figured putting this together as a recipe. So from burnout to bakery, you're rising through this mess. Your hormones were stirred and your identity shifted and purposed into baking. I mean, that's a big difference from those different ingredients that you had put into this mixing of your life, and the workplace batter that collapsed, but your soul rised. You grew through that, through invisible leadership, because you were the only one who could lead. As all women in our own identities, we are our own fighters, and we have to find different ways to put that fight on, and how we put that on, pinched in sugar. And finally, that just like brought you together. You mix chaos with courage, and to see the flavors that you live in today. And, I want to thank you again for coming to speak with this as a real woman in the workplace who has gone through all those, because this isn't a comeback. As we roll out of it, it's all new creations. And this is the beauty of what, as we have to go through this life and go through all these channels. A lot of times, I didn't realize I was creating things in my life through understanding women, hearing history sheets, listening to different stories, seeing different disease and disconnection in the body, seeing all that was going to create me into, like you said, to be sitting here today talking on women's feelings, menopausal changes, the cycling of how we grow and change. But to put it all together and bring it into this structure of the power that, we've been walking through this power, not even knowing that this was the fuel that took us through it. Our hormones and the chemistry that we live in, and that's why I talk about firing up that chemistry, really learning how to nurture ourselves and grow this so that we can come out with these new identities like you created. And here you are, living your life and rising your dough in the field of everything that you were dreaming of. So, this was a really great conversation, and I really want to thank you. So in the future, how do you see this come together for you as yourself, being in this identity now? I kind of figured you found yourself now. This is all you, because kind of shifted away. You've taken care of the caregiving, you've raised the children, you had the marriage life, and here you are floating out in your Rhodes. So that feeling.
This is my hope. My hope is to continue growing the business, to continue developing the strength needed for the steps forward. Because remember, I'm still a caregiver for my mother. However, I hope to continue thriving forward to develop the best product that I could possibly develop. And who knows, maybe one day sell my recipe, or, you never know. The sky's the limit.
And as you told me, and we could end it on that, you told me that when we wake up into this day, you end it, how did you say, on a good note? What was the way you told me that you have to end the day? You gave me a real good phrase, and I can't think of what you said, but it's about ending our day in however we can, because we've made it through that day.
Right. I typically think, thank God for getting me through that particular day. Every day is different. Some days so much harder than others. But if I make it through, I just kind of throw my hands up and thank you, God, for, getting me through that next, this next stage of my life. Because they say everything happens for a reason. You just have to keep your eyes open to see the sign. Sometimes you don't have your eyes open when you see the sign there. Right now, I feel my sign is my pinched and sugared business. And I feel that, that even if it's a bad day, I try to end it as, thank you for getting me through, and, can't wait for the next moment. See what happens.
Wow, so that's wonderful. So I guess at the end of your day, then the best thing that any woman and for all of us in this world is ending us our day and sleeping under the stars of gratefulness and gratitude and giving thanks because we made it. And again, tomorrow, as you say, tomorrow's promise to God is all His and not ours. So thank you so
Correct.
much for joining me and talking with me about these different shifts that women go through and understanding a little bit more about that agency lifestyle because as a technologist in radiology and being on I was never in an agency, but agency techs were rented. And I didn't see the pressures of the emergency in x-ray tech as it is as a nurse. And the way you
Yes.
built that up and created that image for me is really powerful because, this is why the nurses are under all this stress and go through so many changes. And that demand for them is still growing. We're still at a loss of population for
Yes.
nurses. And I hope to see these futures grow because so many people in healthcare are disconnecting from being in relations with
Yes.
people. But those emergencies, the shortage, as you said, the hospitals are waiting. You got a clinic waiting and only have one body that you could possibly send. And it's up to choice that she's making. So yeah, just
Right.
that
I do
leading.
want to.
Go ahead.
I do want to add something to real quickly. Nurses choose agency because they get paid more money. However, let me just say, they get paid more money and they have more flexibility to choose the hours that they want. Many still work a full-time job at a facility, but still work agency because they know the need is there, and they know because the need is there, they're going to get paid top dollar to fill that need.
Wow.
So you see so there's a lot of competition out there because there's a lot of agencies trying to get those same nurses to work at all these same facilities. So but the nurses get paid good money for picking up these agency shifts, but it's a harder job too because they're walking into a place they've never been before and they have to pick up the pace as if they were there all week. That's not easy for everyone.
No,
Yeah.
that's not. Maybe we
And
need
and hence sometimes the shortage, because when nurses realize that it's not always that easy, they then decide, no, you know what, I'm going to stick with just working for the facility instead of agency. So
that's what
just to say, it depends on the nurse. It depends on the type of nurse and the personality, but the need is definitely there and the shortage is definitely there. And unless we get more nurses to fill it, we're going to have short staff facilities with lack of care for your family members and etc.
Wow. Yeah, that's why the caregivers are rising up. Well, again, thank you so much for sharing all that.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we might have to do another segment on nurses because they are an important role in the hospital. I mean, just in medical, period. I mean, we all have a position, but those nurses really bring it all together. So thanks for the conversation, and thanks a lot for sitting down with me today, Rhodes. And
Thanks for
brought a
having
lot
me.
to the table, and it really brings together my conversations about why we become invisible and how we need to stay in the light because, by the end of the day, there's a time for that gratitude just to be here and to have gone through all that havoc, whether it was chaotic or it was full of courage, strength, and a rise in you to bring out that wonderful you. So thanks again for being here. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for all you do and opening, this conversation to women who don't always think of having a conversation about, because we always kind of push our feelings behind. So I appreciate all you do to get it out there so people could realize, yeah, they're not the only ones. We all have a challenge every day of our life and we all handle it differently.
And we're not a chameleon. We are an octopus.
An octopus. You know what? Yes. I use chameleon a lot because I have to become someone so quickly at moments. But yes, an octopus is a better characterization of what women have to do.
Everything we're reaching for. Thank you so much.
Right.
Thank you. Radio. Thank you for having us conversational talk today. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
This podcast is brought to you by Envision U. Envision U has discovered how to impact spirit, body, and soul with spray technology in just 30 seconds. With Envision U, you can achieve optimal health and start living the life you have always dreamed of. Use the promo code envisinu.com/VernDix to take control of your health naturally. PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.